Hello and welcome to the sixth section of the Web Development with Angular 2 and Bootstrap. In the previous section, we covered how Angular manages modules, components, templates, and building blocks of Angular application architecture. In this section, we're going to cover the process of doing two-way data binding and firing DOM events and filtering data with pipes. In the first video, we're going to talk about property binding in Angular components. Property binding allows us to set a property of an element to the value of a template expression. Here we bind the source property of any element to some property from other components. Binding expressions can be written in different ways. Property binding allows us to set a property of an element to the value of a template expression. Using property binding, we can supply the value to the element, and it can be written using interpolation, using double curly brackets, or using square brackets. Mostly, this is used to dynamically update DOM property from our component. Let's take a look at this. Let's quickly understand these one-by-one property binding and interpolation. Our binding target is always enclosed in square brackets to the left of the equals and identifies a property of the element. The binding source is always enclosed in quotes to the right of the equals and specifies the template expression. For comparison, here's a similar binding using interpolation. In this example, we're using property binding by using brackets and using double curly brackets, and we are using interpolation binding. The template expression is enclosed in curly braces with no quotes. This is the same as what we were doing since Angular 1.x. So here we are getting host.image, which is a kind of interpolation where they are getting the dynamic value, and here we are binding the style of a particular image using property binding. The general guideline is to prefer property binding over interpolation. So we are doing property binding. Here also we are doing property binding and interpolation. Like interpolation, property binding is one way from the src class property to the target element property. It effectively allows us to control our template's DOM from our components class. In this example, we're controlling style properties of image using width and height by putting them dynamically. Using property binding, we are assigning height and width dynamically to our image element. Overall, we see our template. We are doing property binding and interpolation, both according to our requirements. Here we are doing interpolation getting the value of image, and here we are doing a property binding to set the height and width of the image. For title, we are doing interpolation, and for image property, we are doing property binding. So this is the title we are getting doing interpolation, and here we are doing a property binding. Let's run our application. Here I have made the height and width dynamic using property binding expressions. So now the values will be passed from the component itself. This is how we can control the DOM properties of our component. Here I am setting the image width and height of a particular image. So now we've seen how to use property binding to bind several properties of the image element to properties of the component class. Let's now add some action with the data, which we are showing on the browser's like button for every dish to select that or hide that. We need to respond to user events. Let's do that in the next section. In the next video, we'll talk about DOM events and we'll see how to handle the event.